Under the blazing sun of the untamed plains, the wind carried whispers of a life few dared to imagine. Canyons stretched like ancient scars across the land, and the scent of wild sage and dusty soil clung to every corner of the ranch. It was a land where survival demanded grit. Hearts often learned the hard way that love could be as wild and unpredictable as the storms that rolled over the mesas. Here, among the horses and the echo of hooves on the dry earth, lived a man whose presence commanded attention without a word. Apache, a muscular Native American warrior with long black hair and tribal jewelry around his neck, moved through the ranch with the calm certainty of someone born to lead. His fit, model-like muscular build and small tribal tattoos marked him as a figure both fierce and captivating, a man who seemed carved from the very mountains that shadowed his home. Apache's life had been one of solitude and silent strength, until the day a carriage creaked along the dusty road, carrying a widow who had seen more sorrow than most could endure. Her name was Leora, a woman with eyes like storm clouds and a soul weathered by grief. She had 5 children, each a living testament to a life that had demanded courage beyond their years. She was not the fragile type, not the kind to crumble under hardship. Yet the way she held herself spoke of battles fought quietly and tirelessly. Apache watched her approach with a mixture of curiosity and respect, sensing a connection he could not yet name. There was a strange kind of beauty and resilience, and Leora embodied it fully, even as the truth of her pregnancy added a fragile tension to her steps. The ranch, sprawling across the rugged landscape, had seen few visitors who stayed for long. Life here was harsh, the days ruled by the sun's relentless heat and the work that left no room for weakness. Yet as Apache opened his doors to Leora and her children, the air seemed to shift, filled with unspoken promises and the possibility of something new. Leora's children were cautious, protective of their mother and wary of the stranger who had suddenly entered their world. Among them, her eldest daughter Kayla carried a quiet strength, her gaze sharp and discerning. She was a girl on the brink of womanhood, aware of the fragility of life, and yet eager to carve her own path amidst the shadows of her family struggles. The initial days were tense, each sunrise a challenge to find rhythm in a life suddenly shared. Apache worked alongside the children, his hands skilled and steady, teaching them the ways of the land while subtly earning their trust. There were moments of laughter, rare and bright, cutting through the tension like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Leora, meanwhile, navigated the complexities of her own heart, torn between gratitude, admiration, and an attraction she had never expected to feel. Apache's presence was magnetic, not just for his strength, but for the quiet kindness he showed her children, the way he carried the weight of responsibility with ease, and yet never demanded more than he gave. But as the days turned into weeks, the delicate balance of life on the ranch began to shift. Kayla, once so sure of her boundaries, found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions she could not name. The isolation of the plains, the raw honesty of hard work, and the quiet moments beside Apache stirred feelings she had never anticipated. She began to notice the way he moved, the way his eyes held stories untold, and the strength in his hands that could calm or command. Conflicted and curious, Kayla found herself drawn toward the man her mother had come to rely upon, and in that pull, a tension began to coil around the household like a storm gathering at the horizon. Life on the ranch was never simple, and now, under the weight of unspoken desires and fragile trust, new challenges began to emerge. The rhythm of the days, the feeding of livestock, mending of fences, the long rides across the open plains, masked the undercurrents of passion and uncertainty. Apache and Leora grew closer, their connection undeniable yet restrained by circumstance and duty. Every glance, every touch carried the weight of temptation and the promise of love that could change their lives forever. And yet, within the shadow of that growing intimacy, Kayla's heart stirred in ways that neither she nor Apache were prepared to confront. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and amber, Kayla stood at the edge of the barn, her thoughts tangled and restless. She felt a stirring deep within her, a mix of fear, curiosity, and longing that refused to be ignored. In the distance, Apache worked the horses, his silhouette outlined by the last golden rays of the day. She watched him, captivated and trembling, unaware that the choices she made in the coming days could alter the very fabric of their lives. Meanwhile, Leora prepared supper inside, unaware of the emotional storm brewing just beyond the wooden walls. The ranch, once a place of routine and quiet labor, now held secrets and desires that none could fully name. The bonds of family, loyalty, and love were being tested in ways that promised both joy and heartbreak. Apache, steadfast and powerful, stood as both protector and enigma, his presence a beacon and a challenge. Leora, brave and enduring, felt the pull of a new life unfolding before her eyes. And Kayla, caught between innocence and awakening desire, faced choices that would ripple through the heart of the ranch and beyond. As night fell, the wind whispered through the canyons, carrying with it the scent of sage and untold stories. The stars began to shimmer above the rugged horizon, silent witnesses to a drama that was only beginning to unfold. No one on the ranch could foresee the events that awaited them, the choices, the confessions, and the consequences that would test love, loyalty, and the strength of the human heart. Apache, Leora, and Kayla each stood on the edge of a new chapter, the tension thick in the cool night air, a storm of emotions waiting to break. And in that stillness the question lingered, unspoken yet urgent: who would claim their heart, and at what cost? The wind shifted again, and in its whisper lay the promise of love, conflict, and secrets that would soon demand reckoning. The ranch had changed forever, and nothing would remain the same. Every heartbeat carried suspense, every glance held meaning, and the lives of a pregnant widow, her children, and a warrior named Apache were now entwined in a story that had only just begun, leaving every soul on the plains on the edge of discovery and desire. The nights on the ranch carried a strange stillness, broken only by the soft snorts of horses and the distant howl of coyotes. Apache often stayed awake long after the others had gone to sleep, leaning against the porch railing, the moonlight tracing the sharp lines of his face. His mind wandered through memories of a life shaped by the land, by battles fought silently, and by choices that had left him alone more often than not. He had always believed that solitude was a shield, yet the arrival of Leora and her children challenged every instinct. Her presence stirred emotions he had long buried: compassion, desire, and the undeniable pull of something far greater than mere survival. Leora, meanwhile, moved through her days with a careful balance of hope and caution. The children depended on her in ways that sometimes left her feeling both exhausted and proud. Yet beneath her strength she carried an anxiety she could not fully name. Her heart recognized Apache's steadiness, his capacity to protect and nurture. Yet she feared the vulnerability that came with trusting him completely. Every glance from him seemed to linger too long, every word was layered with meaning, and she felt herself both drawn to him and wary of the consequences that such closeness could bring. Kayla remained a storm within herself, as she watched Apache with a fascination she did not understand, feeling a magnetic pull she could not explain. At times she found herself lingering near him under the guise of helping with chores, her pulse quickening with every passing second. She was clever and careful, but emotions have a way of slipping past even the strongest defenses. In the quiet of the barn or the fields, she sometimes caught herself imagining what it would be like to have Apache notice her the way he did her mother, to see the fire in her own eyes reflected in his steady gaze. It was dangerous thinking, and she knew it, yet the thrill of it made her heart race. The children, though younger and often oblivious to the deeper currents of adult emotion, sensed the shift in the household. They whispered among themselves about the way Apache looked at their mother, about the subtle smiles exchanged in the kitchen or while tending the livestock. They did not understand the full weight of love, of desire, or of restraint, but they felt the tension. For them, the ranch had always been a place of routine and protection. Now it seemed infused with a new energy that was both exciting and frightening. Days blended into one another with hard work, long rides across the open plains, and quiet moments that lingered just beyond conversation. Apache taught the children to ride, to care for the animals, and to understand the land as both a provider and a teacher. He was patient, firm, and yet remarkably gentle when the work allowed for softness. Leora observed him with a mixture of admiration and longing, noticing how naturally the children gravitated toward him, how they respected his strength without fear. It was the kind of respect that did not need words, that spoke through actions and presence. Evenings were quieter, more intimate. The golden light of sunset spilled across the plains, casting long shadows and illuminating the rugged beauty of the ranch. Apache and Leora would sometimes sit together on the porch, sharing moments of conversation that hinted at deeper emotions. She spoke of her past, of the life she had lived before tragedy struck, and he listened, offering comfort without judgment. In those moments, a bond began to form, subtle yet undeniable. It was a connection built not just on attraction, but on understanding and mutual respect. Kayla, ever watchful, often lingered at the edges of these interactions. She could not help but notice the way her mother's eyes softened in Apache's presence, the quiet laugh that seemed reserved just for him. It stirred a mixture of admiration, jealousy, and confusion within her. She wanted to trust her instincts, yet something told her that the feelings growing in her heart were dangerous. She began to observe him more closely, the way his hands moved while handling the horses, the way his voice carried authority without arrogance, the small gestures of kindness that revealed the man beneath the warrior. One afternoon, a storm rolled across the plains, dark clouds gathering and wind whipping the dust into swirling patterns. The ranch seemed to hold its breath as Apache and the children hurried to secure the livestock. Leora moved quickly to bring the smaller ones inside, her heart racing with the anxiety of potential danger. Kayla, despite her youth, instinctively took on a role of protectiveness, guiding the younger children and ensuring no harm came to them. In the intensity of the storm, emotions ran higher, and the sense of danger heightened the underlying tension between them all. As the wind howled and rain began to lash against the roof, moments of quiet intimacy emerged in unexpected ways. Apache found himself reaching out instinctively, steadying Leora when a loose shutter threatened to fly open. Their hands brushed, and in that simple touch, there was a spark, a reminder of what was possible. Kayla, witnessing it from the doorway, felt a pang of longing and a strange sense of guilt. She could not deny the attraction growing inside her, yet she feared what it might mean for the fragile harmony of their household. The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving the ranch drenched and glistening under the soft glow of twilight. The air smelled of wet earth and sage, carrying a freshness that contrasted with the tension still lingering between them. That evening, the family gathered around the fireplace. The children exhausted from the day's chaos, Leora quietly tending to them, and Apache seated nearby, his presence both commanding and comforting. Kayla sat across from him, her mind racing, her eyes unwilling to look away, each flicker of his gaze sending waves of emotion through her. In the days that followed, subtle shifts in their relationships began to take shape. Leora and Apache grew closer, their interactions tinged with tenderness and quiet longing. Kayla's admiration and curiosity became more intense, her thoughts often drifting to what might be, what could never be spoken aloud. The tension was palpable, and it hung over the ranch like a cloud, waiting for the right moment to burst. The children, unaware of the complexities, continued their routines, adding moments of light-heartedness that contrasted with the heavy undercurrents of adult emotion. As the sun rose each morning, painting the plains in shades of gold and amber, the story of the ranch deepened. Secrets and desires intertwined with daily life, and every glance, every touch carried weight. Apache's steadfastness, Leora's resilience, and Kayla's awakening feelings formed a complex web, each thread pulling them closer to challenges they could not yet foresee. The plains held their own power, shaping the lives of those who dared to live within them. And the wind whispered promises of love, conflict, and revelation yet to come. The tension was unrelenting, the uncertainty ever present. Each character carried desires and fears that could not be ignored, and the ranch, once a place of simple survival, had transformed into a landscape of emotion, longing, and temptation. The bond between Apache and Leora grew stronger, yet the stirrings in Kayla's heart hinted at complications no one could anticipate. The nights were long, the days filled with unspoken truths, and the story of love and struggle on the plains was only beginning to reveal itself. The horizon glimmered with possibilities, yet the path forward was uncertain. The ranch had become a place of both sanctuary and tension, a setting where hearts would be tested and emotions laid bare. Apache, Leora, and Kayla each faced the quiet challenge of understanding their own desires while navigating the fragile bonds that connected them. The story of the pregnant widow, her children, and the warrior who had entered their lives was far from over. The plains held secrets that promised to shape their destinies in ways none could yet imagine. Every sunrise brought new challenges. Every sunset carried the weight of unresolved longing, and the wind whispered the promise of choices yet to be made. The ranch was alive with emotion, and the story of Apache, Leora, and Kayla was unfolding, each day deepening the mystery and the tension that would define their lives. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again, and the next chapter of love, desire, and the trials of the plains was waiting just beyond the horizon. The ranch had settled into a rhythm, yet the tension beneath the surface grew heavier with each passing day. Apache woke before dawn, moving silently through the stables as the first light crept over the horizon. Even the quiet of early morning did not hide the stirrings in his heart. He had come to care deeply for Leora, for her children, and for the life they had begun to share. But Kayla's presence complicated every thought he tried to hold steady. Her gaze lingered in ways that were impossible to ignore, and he caught himself questioning the boundaries he had long respected. He reminded himself that restraint was a part of survival, yet the pull was undeniable. Leora, meanwhile, found herself struggling with the subtle changes in the household. She felt secure in Apache's protection and his growing affection, yet she sensed a tension between her daughter and the man she admired. Kayla's eyes often held questions and unspoken desires that Leora did not want to confront, yet she could not pretend she did not notice. The complexity of their relationships weighed heavily on her, and she found herself staying up late, watching her children sleep and wondering how the fragile balance of love and loyalty could survive in such close quarters. She loved her children fiercely, yet she could not deny that her own heart longed for connection, for the intimacy she had been denied since the loss of her husband. Kayla's inner turmoil grew day by day. She tried to hide her emotions, attempting to focus on her chores or her studies of the land and animals. But the pull she felt toward Apache was persistent. She admired his strength, his skill with the horses, and the quiet confidence that radiated from him. At the same time, she felt guilt gnawing at her. Mother's happiness was tied to Apache, and Kayla knew that any misstep could shatter the delicate trust between them. And yet, the human heart does not always obey reason. In secret moments, she found herself imagining a future where she was noticed in ways beyond admiration, though fear and instinct warned her to remain careful. The children, younger and more innocent, were attuned to the subtle shifts in the ranch's atmosphere. Their whispers behind doors, the sideways glances during mealtime, the small questions asked in hesitant tones, they all spoke of awareness beyond their years. The youngest, a spirited boy named Dagan, noticed Apache's attention to his mother and tried, in his childish way, to assert himself, vying for recognition and protection. Meanwhile, the middle children struggled to understand the emotions around them, sensing the unspoken rules of adults yet unable to name them. The ranch had always been a place of survival and hard work, but now it pulsed with an energy that was complicated and unpredictable. Apache, ever vigilant and patient, attempted to maintain focus on the work that needed doing. He knew that the land could be unforgiving, that the ranch required strength, endurance, and careful planning, yet no amount of physical labor could quiet the emotional currents swirling around him. When he repaired fences, he found his mind drifting to Leora's smile. When he guided the children on horseback, he thought of Kayla's bright eyes and how they seemed to watch him more closely than the rest. The duality of his feelings created tension in his chest, a conflict between loyalty, desire, and honor that he could not yet reconcile. One morning, a messenger arrived from the neighboring settlement, carrying news of a drought threatening nearby ranches and an outbreak of sickness among the livestock. Apache knew the coming months would test them all, not just in strength, but in unity and resilience. The threat forced Leora and him to plan, to strategize, and to lean on each other more than ever. Yet even in the midst of practical concerns, the emotional tension could not be ignored. Kayla, sensing her mother's reliance on Apache, felt a mix of fear and longing. She wanted to trust in the routine of the ranch, to immerse herself in the work and forget the growing ache in her heart, but it was impossible to fully suppress. The nights brought their own kind of storm, as the wind rattled the shutters and the fire flickered low in the hearth. Leora and Apache often found themselves sitting in silence, the kind that spoke of both understanding and restraint. The closeness was comforting, yet every glance toward Kayla reminded Leora of the delicate balance they must maintain. Kayla, in turn, found herself drawn to the soft moments, the quiet laughter shared between her mother and Apache, longing for a connection she knew she should not desire. Every night seemed to stretch longer, the tension growing with every unspoken word and lingering look. Subplots began to weave themselves into the fabric of ranch life. The children grew curious about the routines of survival, tending the animals, preparing the fields, and learning to read the subtle signs of weather changes. They asked questions that led to stories, and those stories revealed the histories of the land. The hardships endured by those who had lived there before, and the resilience required to survive. These lessons mirrored the emotional lessons unfolding among the adults: trust, patience, and the understanding that love is rarely simple. Kayla started spending more time alone, wandering the fields or sketching the mountains, trying to sort the emotions that crowded her mind. Apache noticed, but he respected her distance, uncertain how to approach a situation so delicate. Leora, on her part, encouraged Kayla to confide in her, sensing the girl's inner struggle, but Kayla's pride and fear of judgment held her back. The emotional tension built quietly, like a storm gathering in the distance, each day bringing them closer to an inevitable confrontation, yet leaving them just out of reach. Even the animals seemed attuned to the unrest. Horses became restless, dogs more protective, and the younger children sensitive to these small changes. Often asked questions that Leora and Apache deflected with careful answers. The ranch was alive in every sense, each corner holding both beauty and a hint of danger. Each day, carrying a challenge that tested patience, endurance, and the strength of human hearts. Meanwhile, rumors from the nearby settlement began to trickle in whispers about Apache's past. Stories of his feats as a warrior, and speculation about the unusual household he now maintained. The gossip, though distant, reached the ears of Leora and Kayla in ways that added another layer of tension. Leora worried that the children might internalize these rumors, or that outsiders might judge her family unfairly. Kayla, however, felt a thrill in the idea that her household was drawing attention, even if that attention was a mixture of admiration and speculation. The emotions swirling through the ranch were becoming a complicated web of desire, loyalty, fear, and curiosity. The days of work and nights of restless thoughts left the adults weary, yet acutely aware of the emotional stakes. Apache's protective instincts extended not only to the physical safety of the ranch, but to the fragile emotional bonds that had begun to form. Leora, trying to maintain balance for her children and herself, felt her heart stretched in ways she had never anticipated. Kayla, struggling with forbidden feelings, found herself caught in a world she was not ready to navigate. As a new storm approached the plains, dark clouds gathering like shadows over the hills, the tension on the ranch seemed to thicken. Each character faced choices they could not yet articulate, emotions that threatened to spill over, and secrets that hung between them like unspoken truths. The ranch, a place of survival and hard work, had become a stage for a drama that no one could fully control. The wind carried the scent of rain and the promise of change. And every glance, every touch, every fleeting moment became charged with meaning. And in that charged air, the ranch waited, each heartbeat echoing with anticipation, each soul on edge, knowing that the coming days would bring tests of love, loyalty, and desire that could alter their lives forever. The plains, vast and untamed, held their secrets close, ready to reveal them when the moment was right. Leaving Apache, Leora, and Kayla poised on the edge of discovery and longing, the next chapter of their lives ready to unfold. The plains held their breath as the days grew longer and the heat intensified. The ranch, usually a place of hard labor and quiet survival, seemed charged with an electricity that neither Apache nor Leora could ignore. Every glance, every brush of hands while feeding the horses, every soft word shared across the kitchen table seemed to carry weight far beyond its ordinary meaning. Leora felt her heart ache with a mixture of hope and fear, knowing that the bond between her and Apache had grown stronger with each day, yet aware that Kayla's quiet longing added a tension she could not control. Kayla spent more and more time alone in the hills, her thoughts tangled with desire and confusion. The sight of Apache working under the scorching sun, his muscles flexing with effortless strength, or his quiet attentiveness when Leora spoke, sent waves of emotion through her. She hated herself for the feelings she could not suppress, yet each passing day made them more persistent, more impossible to ignore. The wildness of the land mirrored the storm brewing within her, and she felt caught between the loyalty to her mother and the restless curiosity of a heart awakening to passion. Apache, aware of the growing tension, did his best to maintain a careful distance from Kayla, though even his discipline could not fully mute the pull he felt. He admired her spirit, her intelligence, and the fire that flashed in her eyes. But he knew the dangers of crossing boundaries that should never be crossed. At the same time, his bond with Leora deepened into something that threatened to consume them both. Their hands brushed while mending fences, their eyes met across the dining table, and small touches of reassurance became moments filled with longing. Every day, the line between restraint and desire grew thinner, and the air on the ranch seemed to vibrate with the unspoken tension. The children, sensitive to these emotions, even if they could not name them, added another layer of complexity. Dagan, the youngest, would sometimes linger near Apache, seeking comfort and attention, while Kalen, the middle boy, noticed the subtle shifts in the family dynamics and questioned the quiet tension he could sense but not understand. Even the youngest girls, bright and curious, seemed to notice the heightened emotions, asking questions about the relationships they observed and forcing Leora to answer carefully, lest the children misunderstand and amplify the tension even further. One afternoon, as a storm rolled in across the plains, Apache and Leora found themselves alone in the barn, securing supplies and reinforcing the stalls. Rain began to fall in sheets, hammering the roof and drenching the horses, while wind rattled the walls. In the dim light, their hands touched as they reached for the same rope, and the electricity between them was undeniable. Leora's heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at him. Noticing the intensity in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched as though restraining himself from saying or doing something forbidden, Apache felt the same pull, the same tension that had been growing day by day. Yet he reminded himself of the responsibilities and boundaries he could not cross. Kayla, hidden behind the barn, had followed Apache under the guise of helping with the storm. She had intended to assist with the work, but now, seeing the closeness between her mother and Apache, her emotions flared uncontrollably. She felt jealousy, longing, and a confusing mixture of admiration and desire. Her heart raced, and her hands trembled as she leaned against the barn wall, torn between staying hidden and revealing herself in a moment of impulse. The storm outside mirrored the storm within her, the tension building to a point that seemed impossible to contain. That evening, after the storm passed and the ranch was soaked but intact, the family gathered around the fire. The flickering flames cast shadows that danced across the walls, highlighting every expression, every glance, every lingering touch. Leora kept her composure, yet she could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken emotions that hung thickly in the air. Apache sat close, his presence commanding yet comforting, his hand occasionally brushing against hers as if drawn by some magnetic force. Kayla sat nearby, pretending to focus on the fire, but acutely aware of every movement, every breath, and every heartbeat shared between them. The days that followed were filled with small but charged moments. Apache helped Leora with tasks, their hands meeting more often than needed, and their eyes holding conversations unspoken. Kayla found herself drawn to the fields and the horses, creating reasons to cross paths with Apache, hoping for a word, a glance, or the slightest sign that her feelings were noticed. The emotional tension was a current that pulled through the ranch like an invisible river, flowing between all of them, threatening to overflow. Meanwhile, practical challenges on the ranch grew more urgent. The drought had reached neighboring lands, and whispers of livestock disease were growing louder. Apache knew the coming weeks would test not just their hearts, but their ability to survive together. The strain of keeping the ranch alive under these conditions forced every member of the household to confront their fears and rely on each other in ways they had not before. Leora felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her, yet she also felt a spark of courage she had not experienced in years. Kayla's curiosity and intelligence became an unexpected asset, her insights into the land and animals helping Apache devise plans to protect their livestock. Amidst these trials, the emotional tension reached a crescendo. Kayla's feelings became more difficult to hide, and even Apache found himself caught in moments where restraint was almost impossible. Leora noticed the glances exchanged, the subtle shifts in body language, and the small hesitations in speech. The proximity of desire, loyalty, and curiosity made every interaction heavy with meaning. Every word loaded with potential consequence. The ranch, alive with the rhythm of work and nature, became a pressure cooker of emotion, each day bringing them closer to a moment where restraint could no longer hold. One night, a fire broke out near the edge of the property, spreading quickly through dry brush. Leora, and the children rushed to contain it, working tirelessly under the glowing light of the flames. Kayla ran alongside Apache, assisting wherever she could, her fear for the animals and the people she loved mingling with her forbidden emotions. The danger heightened every feeling, every glance, every touch. Apache's hand brushed hers as he handed her a bucket of water, and the spark between them was nearly unbearable. Leora, noticing the fleeting moment, felt a mixture of relief, concern, and an unspoken understanding that their emotions were on the brink of overflowing. After the fire was finally brought under control, the ranch was left smoking, charred patches marking the edge of their property. The family, exhausted and shaken, gathered in the main house. Sweat and ash covered their skin, yet the fire had forced them into moments of raw honesty and cooperation. Emotions were frayed, hearts were racing, and every lingering glance carried more weight than ever before. Apache sat near Leora, their hands brushing lightly, while Kayla remained close by, her eyes constantly darting between them, caught in a web of longing, jealousy, and anticipation. The tension was almost unbearable. Every day brought new challenges, both practical and emotional. Each moment seemed to hold the potential for revelation, confrontation, or confession. The ranch was no longer just a place of work and survival. It had become a crucible where love, desire, loyalty, and temptation clashed and mingled. The air itself seemed charged. In the horizon, golden with the light of early morning, held the promise of moments that could change everything. As dawn broke over the plains, the family emerged from the house to greet the day. The world quiet, but alive with possibility. Apache's gaze swept over the land, then lingered on Leora, then Kayla. Aware that the coming hours could shift the balance of their lives forever, Leora felt her heart tighten, knowing that the unspoken truths and desires were approaching a breaking point. Kayla's pulse raced, her thoughts consumed by what she wanted, feared, and dared not voice. And Apache, steadfast yet pulled in conflicting directions, understood that the moment of reckoning was near. The ranch held its breath along with them, the wind carrying the scent of sage and the memory of fire. Every heartbeat, every glance, every word unspoken was charged with anticipation. The stage was set for the climax of their story, where emotions would collide, secrets would threaten to surface, and choices would have to be made. Nothing would remain the same, and the plains themselves seemed to lean in, ready to witness the storm that was about to break, leaving the family teetering on the edge of desire, danger, and discovery. The sun rose over the plains, casting golden light across the ranch, and revealing the quiet aftermath of the storm and the fire. Apache moved through the yard, checking the fences, the animals, and the damage done, but his thoughts were never far from Leora and Kayla. The events of the past days had forced every emotion into the open, and now the household felt like it was holding its collective breath, waiting to see what would come next. The air carried both relief and anticipation, as though the land itself sensed that a turning point had arrived. Leora stepped onto the porch, her eyes scanning the horizon, feeling the calm after the storm in both the land and her heart. She had come to understand that love required courage, patience, and honesty, and that the quiet strength of Apache had taught her more about herself than she had ever known. When Apache appeared beside her, offering a hand to steady her as she leaned against the railing, there was no need for words. Their connection, forged in trials and tension, now felt solid and unshakable. Kayla approached cautiously, unsure of how to navigate the complex emotions that had been building inside her. Apache noticed her hesitation and nodded gently, acknowledging her presence without pressure. She had spent days wrestling with feelings that she did not fully understand, but now, seeing the quiet certainty between Apache and her mother, she began to recognize a truth she had been avoiding. Love and loyalty could coexist, and admiration for another did not have to diminish the bonds she held with her family. The tension inside her slowly gave way to a sense of clarity, a realization that her own place in the ranch and the hearts of those she loved was secure. The younger children, sensing the shift in the household, began to relax. Their laughter returned to the yard, blending with the soft calls of the horses and the wind in the sagebrush. Even Dagon, who had been so possessive and anxious, allowed himself to play freely, knowing that their family was stronger and more united than ever. Kaylin and the youngest girls followed suit, joining in with the chores and enjoying moments of shared joy that had been rare in recent weeks. The ranch, which had seemed full of tension and quiet storms, now hummed with a balance of energy and calm, a testament to the resilience of both the land and the hearts that lived upon it. Apache and Leora worked side by side throughout the day, repairing fences, tending to the livestock, and preparing for the uncertain days ahead. Their hands brushed often, their glances lingered, and the quiet smiles they shared carried all the intimacy that had been building for weeks. There was no rush, no need to speak aloud what had been understood in every shared effort, every touch, and every small moment of care. The children watched, absorbing the example of partnership, respect, and love, understanding in their own way that the bonds of family could withstand tension, desire, and uncertainty when honesty and courage were present. Kayla spent the afternoon riding with Apache, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The wind whipped through her hair as they rode across the open plains, and the freedom of the ride mirrored the freedom she now felt in her emotions. She spoke to Apache of the land, of the horses, and of her dreams, and he listened attentively, his calm presence offering guidance and encouragement. There was no inappropriate tension, no unspoken danger, only the growing confidence of a young woman who understood her own heart and the value of respect and boundaries. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, the family gathered for supper. The table, usually a place of quiet meals, now held laughter, conversation, and the comfort of shared triumphs and challenges. Leora looked at Apache, her eyes soft with gratitude and love. Apache returned her gaze, steady and sure, knowing that they had weathered storms, both literal and emotional, together. Kayla, seated nearby, smiled genuinely, her earlier turmoil replaced by a sense of belonging and understanding. The children were happy, safe, and more connected than ever. In the days that followed, the ranch began to thrive. Apache's leadership, combined with Leora's resilience and Kayla's emerging wisdom, brought new strength to the household. The land responded to their care, the pastures grew greener, the animals healthier, and even the crops planted in cautious hope showed signs of life. The family learned that challenges could be faced together and that love, patience, and trust could turn tension into harmony. Each member of the ranch played a role, and in their cooperation, they found joy, pride, and satisfaction. Kayla's relationship with Apache settled into a healthy admiration and respect, her earlier infatuation giving way to deep familial loyalty and the excitement of youthful independence. She became a mentor to the younger children in small ways, teaching them to ride, care for animals, and understand the land. Leora and Apache's love blossomed quietly, a deep and enduring bond strengthened by trials and tempered by understanding. Even in moments of quiet, they shared a connection that needed no words, a steady presence that anchored the household and reassured every heart. The ranch became a place of harmony, filled with the laughter of children, the quiet work of adults, and the beauty of untamed land thriving under careful stewardship. The storms that had once threatened to divide them were now memories, lessons that taught endurance, compassion, and the importance of communication. Apache, Leora, and Kayla had all learned that love could take many forms, that desire could be tempered by respect, and that family was strengthened through honesty and courage. Evenings were spent on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, sharing stories, dreams, and quiet reflections. The fire in the hearth mirrored the warmth in their hearts, a reminder that they had built something lasting, something that could withstand the challenges of both nature and human emotion. Apache's strong hands held Leora's, his eyes reflecting both love and pride, while Kayla sat nearby, content and confident in her place within the family. The children's laughter carried across the yard, mingling with the whisper of the wind in the sage, a soundtrack to a life now full and complete. As the seasons changed, the ranch continued to prosper. Spring brought new life to the pastures. Summer, the hard work of tending crops and animals. In winter, the quiet warmth of shared home and hearth. The family faced each season together, stronger and more united than ever. Challenges came, as they always would, but they faced them as a team, with trust, love, and mutual respect guiding their choices. The bonds forged in tension and trial had been tempered into something enduring, and each heart on the ranch felt the security and joy of belonging. Apache, Leora, and Kayla had grown in ways they could not have imagined. Apache learned the depth of patience and the joy of nurturing a family. Leora discovered a strength that went beyond survival into love and fulfillment, and Kayla embraced the freedom to grow, learn, and define her own path while respecting the bonds around her. The children thrived under their care, each learning lessons of resilience, loyalty, and compassion that would carry them forward in life. The ranch, once a place of tension and uncertainty, had become a home filled with love, laughter, and quiet triumph. The plains stretched endlessly around them, beautiful, wild, and alive. A reflection of the lives that had found balance within their boundaries. Apache, Leora, and Kayla stood together, looking out over the land they had worked to protect, the home they had built, and the family they had nurtured. The tension of the past had dissolved, leaving in its place peace, fulfillment, and hope for the future. In the golden light of evening, as the wind carried the scent of sage and distant mountains, the family gathered for one final quiet moment together. Apache's arm rested around Leora's shoulder, Kayla's hand rested lightly on her mother's, and the children played nearby, safe and content. The ranch, their hearts, and their lives were aligned in harmony, a testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring power of love. The past storms, tensions, and trials had given way to a life of joy, security, and hope, leaving every soul on the ranch at peace with the present and ready for the promise of tomorrow. And in that stillness, beneath the vast sky of the American plains, the story came to its natural, satisfying close. Every question had found its answer, every tension resolved, and the family, united by love, strength, and loyalty, looked forward to a future filled with promise, laughter, and the enduring warmth of home. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and gives us the courage to create even more exciting stories. If this story touched your heart,